So now is the time for our panel. And along with our presenters today, I've invited Jacinta Riedinger from Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota. She's the manager of wellness services. And Rory Beil, who you saw earlier in the wellness break. And all of these panelists, I value their opinion very, very much. So it's going to be fun to ask them some questions. If you're going to ask some questions, please put those on the Q&A panel. I'll be able to take a look at them as we're going along here. But I'm going to start the conversation with a statement and a question that I want all the panelists to answer. And it's going to take, I want you to spend about a minute or two, however long it takes to do that. So I was actually listening to a webinar recently with Kurtis and Nicole. And Nicole made a great statement. You know, we really have the opportunity to leverage this crisis and emerge as happier and healthier organizations. And I truly believe that. I think we have a great opportunity here. So if we just simply take some time and reflect on what's been happening the last 4 months and how our work and our life has been kind of disrupted, I think we can emerge stronger and better. So, you know, I think for the most part, people have been able to adjust to work-life balances, and organizations are realizing that, you know, this actually does work. You know, and maybe it's been a time for some people to be able to get out and get some movement breaks and take those breaks during the day to take a walk or a bike ride or whatever it might be. Or maybe they've been able to reconnect with their family. You know, maybe some have addressed their mental health issues during this time. You know, and with racial injustice becoming front and center for our lives over the last couple of months, maybe we've had some time to examine our own biases and how we treat people. And for others, you know, maybe it's been a time to kind of eliminate some of this busyness in their life and to evaluate what's important to them and prioritize it. So the question is this: what will the new normal look like when we do go back to the office? And what's Worksite Wellness going to look like when we return back to the office? So I'm going to start out with Rory and see what your thoughts are on this.
Thanks, Pete. You know, I think it's informative to look to the past to help us have some guess at what the future might look like. And so I think of a previous generation. My grandma grew up during the Great Depression, and that was a time of scarcity, and that impacted her and her generation throughout. As a child, when I would go to her house, she'd have 100 margarine containers in her basement, because if one day something happened again, she was going to be prepared for it. And I think that is not unlike what we're going to see with us now, and particularly our youth, when it comes to things like washing their hands and avoiding transmission. There are going to be practices that are going to stick with us, maybe even subconsciously, for the rest of our lives. So I think that's certainly going to be a new normal. I also think that the way we learn and the way we access services is not going to change entirely. We now know that we can do telemedicine. We know that we can access mental health services remotely if we need to. I have friends that have been lifelong exercisers that are doing classes in their living room, and they're from a local facility, and they're loving it. So I think that those opportunities to participate are going to continue. The challenge I see is human connection is really important. And how do we maintain that when we're able to do so many things remotely? Human connection is a big predictor of resiliency. And so it'll be important for our work sites to think about that, for us as individuals to think about how we keep that connection as our world changes.
Great, thank you. You know, that point about human connections is so important. I think that's the thing that we're all missing right now. It's hard to be physically distanced from each other and from our coworkers, and just being in that rhythm of life. So great. Kurtis, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you're probably going to hear 6 different answers up here, because if we knew what new normal was going to look like, we'd all write a book and make millions of dollars, right? On that side, but I think you touch on it with opportunity. I think it's giving organizations and even people a chance to reflect what's happening within their culture, within their company, from a wellness state, from a mental health state, from a well-being state. Whether you're working in a manufacturing plant and you're getting checked every day for your physical health to make sure that you can be in that area, or you're at home and on a computer and you're getting told by your employer to take emergency time off to focus on yourself internally. I think it's really bringing an introspective look of on ourselves, on people, on your employees, and allowing them to take that time that they need to be able to be well on that side. And I think we get moving so fast, and you keep hearing it, right? It only took a pandemic to do this. It only took a pandemic to do that. I think that's another one of those cases where it only took a pandemic for us to realize how important it is to take care of ourselves, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and all those other aspects as well. But I think companies are starting to realize that. And so I think you're gonna see a lot more focus on that moving forward because it's bubbled up to the top, because we know to keep moving in business, you have to have those things taken care of. Your employees have to be healthy physically, mentally, to be able to continue in business, basically. So I think you're gonna see a really retroactive focus internally on employee well-being in general.
No, I think you're right. That's great. And I think we have learned a lot about that, this compassion that we're extending to one another and this empathy. So that's going to be a great takeaway moving forward as well. Thank you. Jodee, what do you think?
Well, like you said, Kurtis, there's going to be a lot of, all of us probably have a different take on this. For me, the word normal is the word I want to focus on, because I spent my whole life trying to be normal like everybody else. And I think this has been a great time for people to have an opportunity to say, what is it that I can bring to an organization because of who I am, my unique abilities? And if we go back to the way things were before, looking for that previous new normal, I think we should focus more on the word new than the word normal, personally. And I think some of the things that have gone underground, or have been underground for generations probably, are now being exposed and allowing us to have conversations that we used to bury and be afraid of. And instead of, because we're so sided right now, let's just be completely honest about that. We're so sided and we're so divided. I think now's the opportunity that people can have to, like you guys have said, look inside themselves and say, what am I committed to bringing together? What am I bringing to shine some light? What am I willing to bring some light to that I might have shied away from in the past? And so going forward, if we're really committed to a new, whatever, reality, normal, whatever it is, it can't look like the old one. And it can't look separated. It can't look like I'm going to point my finger at you and call you a bad person. It's got to be, what can we do coming together? What is it that brings us together? And if we need to stand for a more middle of the road kind of place, I think we'll find that, golly, 90% of us are more alike than we are different anyway. So that's my commitment and my hope, that we will all have conversations about things that matter, even if it's hard.
Excellent insight, Jodee. Yeah, you're right. I don't think normal is going to be normal again. So what can we take away and make it even better, particularly at our work sites? So great. Nicole, what are your thoughts?
Well, when I first started hearing the new normal, anyone who knows me knows it just made me cringe. I just did not love hearing those words together. I started reading a little bit more in depth about it, and I kept reflecting back to the events on 9/11. And one of the research studies that I read said about a year after 9/11 happened, there was a group of reporters who got together, and one of the questions they were asked was, based on those you're interviewing, what are you hearing? When will things go back to normal after this tragedy? And the answer that they said was, we're already there. So it took a year for us to get back to normal after one of the most major terrorist attacks the United States had ever seen. So I think about that a lot when I think about, what has this pandemic done to us? When will we get back to normal? I think a lot about the definition of normal. It's just conforming to standards, right? So my hope is that we think about healthier standards, right? Because a year from now, I do think we will be back to normal. It's just, I hope the standards are healthier. They will look different. But I think when I go to the airport now, I don't think twice about taking off my shoes, right? It's my normal. And so we will adjust. I do believe that. I think our new normal will be normal eventually. I just hope that as companies and organizations and as human beings, we just recognize that it's up to us to have healthier standards in our lives to conform to.
Excellent, excellent. New standards, I think you're right. We've kind of hit this gigantic pause button, and I think we're going to emerge as different people and different organizations because of that. Heather, curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, Pete, my hopes are that the other end of this, we see a bunch of aliens, okay? per what I said earlier today, we need to help develop our humans into aliens. Aliens that have creative minds, wide open hearts, and a lens of empathy. So that is my hope, and I hope that in the workplace we can truly help develop our humans into some aliens.
Excellent, excellent. It's. I think we've really shown the light on the importance, as I talked about with Kurtis, of love and empathy and how valuable those things are. Oftentimes not at the top of the radar for work sites, but I think you're going to see a different tone set for a lot of organizations as well.
Yep.
And finally, Jacinta.
Yes, thank you, Pete. I think when we look at this pandemic situation, and it's a lot of good things has happened along the way as well. I think a lot of you have touched on some of the good things, and I think for us as an organization, how can we help to continue and maintain some of these good things? Particularly, I don't think we ever could have imagined that 95% of our workforce would be working from home and doing it successfully. And, having the time to, focus more on self-care and do some of the things that help create a better life balance, more time with family, and just overall a better sense of self. We've heard stories of employees that, now that I'm working from home, I feel like I can go for a walk and nobody's really watching how long I'm gone from my chair. It doesn't matter if I get sweaty and have to come back to my desk. So people are kind of expanding on some of the things that they maybe never felt comfortable doing before. And so I think for us as an organization, and even prior to the pandemic starting, we've been focusing on developing our leadership team, not only the top senior management, but middle management and across the company to be better equipped to lead the well-being efforts of their teams and to really know the influence that they have in driving these behaviors and what they do and what they say, and then the systems and the norms that they create on their teams and how that really impacts their employees. And to build on kind of what Jodee had said earlier, I loved kind of our obligation as leaders to aspire people to change the world. And if we could add to that, in our work with Laura Putnam, how can we inspire individuals to really be their best versions of themselves? So I think that's what we really want to carry forward after this.
Great. Yeah, people are really finding their work life and their home life are just becoming more blended than ever before. And for some, it's a great thing. They've reconnected with their family. They're able to do things. For others, it's maybe caused some stress. I know this spring people were trying to homeschool their kids and so forth, but that's just a learning curve. And to talk about leadership, how important they are in the well-being equation to what Jodee was talking about. Yeah, that is such an emerging area in wellness right now, how critical the team leader, the supervisor, the manager is to set the tone for their team. Kurtis, I think you had a follow-up
Yeah,
comment.
I just was going to say, I think we're also going to have to see a transition to sweatpants into the professional environment. If we don't, we may have anarchy. So that might be one other thing we may have to adjust to. Yeah.
And daily showers are out.
Yeah. So, yeah.
No, I've spent a lot of time in sweatpants and shorts over the last few months, so it's going to be hard to put long pants back on. All right, excellent insight from everybody. So I've got a few questions. I'm going through the chat. I'm going to start out with Jodee. This one's for you. How do I convince my boss that I should take the leap?
So I'm the English major, remember, and I'm going to caution you to get out of convincing mode, whoever you are. There's no need to convince, because if you force something to happen on the outside, when I say force on the outside, it's got to be an inspiration from the inside for somebody, and anything that feels like a force from the outside will create resistance. So if you feel the need to convince somebody of something, I'd say back that up and ask yourself why you think it's important. So if you can get really clear, you never have to convince. You're always cultivating. A person convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So I'd be happy to have a conversation with whoever that is to help you have that conversation. That is an invitation rather than a force, I think. I hope that helps.
Excellent, thank you. And we will providing all of the contact information for the presenters today, so if you want to have an offline conversation, you'll be able to do that. So, Rory, the next question's for you. Are there any consequences of poor home office ergonomics? So people have had to set up some makeshift workstations at their house. What's the impact of that?
Well, I think there's pros and cons. Pete, you talked about earlier, your dog got lots of activity. So certainly some people have taken this opportunity to build more movement into their day. I don't think it's a stretch, however, to say that some people have probably significantly less. They haven't had to get up and move to get to work. And so movement, having the appropriate setup. Worksites, I think, are going to need to look at helping individuals who are working from home to make sure they can do it healthfully. Because, again, it's not a stretch to think about some of the musculoskeletal postural things. If I'm laying in my bed, if I'm hunched all day, there are consequences down the road. And I'm not as productive an employee if I'm not healthy. And setting my station up at home and finding opportunities for me to move are things going to help me to be healthier and more productive.
Excellent. Yeah, I know that's been an issue for me in particular. When I first started working from home, you know, we all kind of thought, well, this is going to be a month or so and we can just make do. And I had a rickety old chair down in my basement and I was feeling it, my hips and my back. So I had the luxury to go back and get my ergonomic chair from work, and that made all the difference in the world. So that was great. Jacinta, this question is for you. What is Blue Cross doing? How are they responding to well-being for those impacted by COVID?
I think so. I think we all understand that well-being is multidimensional, and I think each one of our speakers today touched on that in some way. I think for us, recognizing maybe what are some of those areas of well-being that are being impacted the most, particularly by the pandemic, and I think of our social and emotional well-being, of course, focusing on quarantining and social distancing, how harmful that can be, and kind of what Rory had mentioned earlier, just the importance of social connection and human connection. But then also looking at financial well-being, which I know was focused on earlier. There was a quote in a recent MetLife Trends survey that said 43% of employees who report that they are suffering from low levels of financial well-being also report low levels of social, emotional, and physical well-being. So they're all interconnected and they all impact each other in a number of ways. So I think we've taken this opportunity to maybe provide some additional resources and support in some areas that maybe have had less focus before. We've rolled out a couple of new programs across our population. Enrich, which is a financial literacy tool we just launched on July 1. Wellbeats, which is a exercise basically from home. It's live stream classes. And then also Learn to Live, which Heather mentioned earlier, to help with our emotional well-being. So we're trying to look at it from a perspective of how can we provide better support and resources to our members.
Excellent, excellent. I know Blue Cross is providing a lot of tools and making it easier to access wellness during this time. And the one thing I heard mentioned a few times today, which was great to hear, is financial well-being. That doesn't get talked about enough, but I think a lot of people are realizing through this that they might need to get their financial world in order to be prepared for these types of events. So I think you're going to see a lot more attention being paid by organizations in that area in particular. So Heather, this question is for you, front and center. What's the most profound thing about being a Gen Z?
So one of the things that I'm pretty fascinated about regarding Generation Z is the way that they want to communicate. So 74% of Generation Z say that they prefer face-to-face communication. Now, I know if you know a Gen Z, you're like, Heather, that's not right. Because I have two at home, and they definitely have those screens in front of them. But I get it. They're truly hungry for that face-to-face connection. They're actually the loneliest generation. And so even though they're so connected virtually, we're all feeling this, right? I'm an extrovert. Can you tell with Kurtis? I mean, yes, I get it. It feels lonely, even though we have these great opportunities to connect online or virtually. I also think about Gen Z, they're not going to want to email. How many of you are using such heavy email at work? I mean, I know we still are. So how do you adjust to those things to help our Gen Z communicate in the way that they're preferring it? So that's just been fascinating information to take in and try to adjust as a result of learning those things.
Interesting. I have 3 of those at home myself, and we do try to have, dinner conversations and sitting. But the most fascinating thing is when we're all together in the living room, all looking at our phones at the same time. So I think we need to get away from that. And like you said, everybody needs that face-to-face interaction.
Yep.
So the next question is for Nicole and Kurtis. What is the one piece of wellness advice that you would share?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, yeah.
So I can share a quick story. During COVID, I decided to start running, which was the worst idea on the planet because I am not a runner. And I think what I realized through that, I signed up for a 5K, which I completed, and I will cross that off the list happily and never do another one again. But I think the best piece of advice that I have that I learned from that is wellness is about understanding who you are and not trying to be someone that you're not. So while running a 5K was not my thing, I did it. I was miserable every single minute that I did it, and I created this weird unhappiness while focusing on my self-care. So what I did learn, though, is that YouTube has amazing yoga videos, which is much more my style, and I started incorporating those into my wellness plan in a really happy and healthy way. So I think the biggest piece of advice is focus on your wellness, but don't forget who you are and what will make you happy.
Oh, that's just a great piece of information. We have to work within our own space and be who we are. And if we're not a marathoner, we're not a marathoner. So great piece of advice. So one more question for Heather.
Do I get to go?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Kurtis.
it's cool, whatever.
Man.
It's fine, Pete. No, it's fine. I'm prepping a question, prepping an answer.
My bad.
Sorry. No, there's 2 of us. Yeah, I know. I don't know if that was the case, but I think my big thing has been through wellness is when my son was younger, he would fall down, he would run into stuff, and I'd be like, "You all right?" And he's like, "I fine," and that was like his thing. It was I fine, and we actually brought that into work as like when things were going absolutely terrible, every team's like, "I fine," we'll make it work. And I think through this whole situation and what's going on, I'm finding out that I'm not always fine, and I think we're finding out as human beings we're not always fine. And being able to have that time to be able to set, okay, I need help with this in some way, shape, or form, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental. I think we get in that state of tough, Midwest, I'm fine, I'll figure it out type of a situation when you're not always fine. And if you can have that in retrospect or introspective look of what you need to get yourself to fine, whatever that is, if it's financial wellness, if it's mental, if it's counseling, whatever it is, to get there. So that's probably my biggest thing with wellness is being able to have that gut check of, I'm not fine at this point.
Great point there. Up here in the Midwest, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, we kind of have this North Dakota tough, and that's wonderful. It gets us through a lot of things, but sometimes that can be a mask as well. So we don't oftentimes pay attention as we should to ourselves and our self-care.
Yeah.
So Heather, this question is for you. So you talked about the rings that you give away for these milestones, and now you're moving maybe for the younger generation to some of these experience-driven events. What are some examples of those events that you're going to be doing?
Sure. So things like self-care, an appointment for a massage, or things like a cooking class or a glass blowing class, something that maybe you wouldn't decide to do on your own, but as a reward, it just makes it exciting and something that you received on behalf of your company. So opportunities really are endless. We try to personalize it, right?
Excellent. So we have time for one more question, and this is for Jodee. you talk about being real. How does that relate to LEAP? Both four-letter words.
I know.
A lot of similar letters.
Somebody's following me online. That's awesome. So REAL is an acronym, LEAP is an acronym, and I'm an English major. I always have to qualify that way. They're very similar because they're reminders for us, I think. And there are a couple of overlaps. So REAL is radical, energized, authentic, and learning-based. So you'll notice some overlap with LEAP and REAL. And LEAP is corporate, REAL is personal. They can both be both. But I think when I got really clear during this COVID time that if I'm trying, as a solopreneur who is a coach and a consultant, if I'm trying to attract clients or people to me, to my mask, to use that terminology, to what I'm supposed to be, all shiny and nice, I'm going to attract clients that I don't want to work with, let's be honest. And if I can take that mask off and be real about it, that takes a leap of faith. So I think they're very related, and they're a little overlappy as well. And the best thing that's happened to me during COVID has been real. The real Get Real circle that I created on Facebook that was started on May 14th and now has 1,100 people in it. I had no idea. People are craving the opportunity to be real. And I think it might take a leap to be real, maybe. Maybe that's how they're related.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so important. I mean, who doesn't love real people, and who doesn't want to be real and true to themselves? So being authentic is the best thing we can possibly do. All right, so we are wrapping up the day right now, and I just want to thank all of you. We had over 500 people join us this morning. I mean, that just blew us away, and that was so cool to see that many people interested in taking part in this event. So you're going to be receiving an email in about a week or so. We're going to provide some information. We're going to provide the contact information for our presenters. So if you do want to have that conversation or have questions for them. And we'd also really appreciate your feedback as well. You know, what did you think about our first ever virtual event? This was new to us, so we're curious what your thoughts are. And would you like to see more of these types of events? And we'll also be providing some additional resources that Jana had mentioned, specifically around the blue zones, how you can get involved in that as well. So I just want to say thank you to all of the presenters. This was fantastic, and you just did a phenomenal job. So if you're out there in the audience, if you can give them a virtual high five or a virtual round of applause, that would be awesome. So thanks again for joining us, and look for some communication coming soon.